Hello there. You're watching Channel 24 World News program live from Algiers. Coming up next are the headlines. Secretary General of the Algerian Foreign Ministry stresses the need to prepare for the upcoming important bilateral events during talks with Russian ambassador to Algeria. Also coming up, Sahrawi Foreign Minister repeated the Continental Organization role to push forward the decolonization path of Western Sahara during a visit to Addis Ababa. Also ahead, the Palestinian Liberation Organization condemned the Zionist aggression perpetrated on the city of Nablus, labeling it a massacre. China and Russia reaffirmed their close bilateral relationships just days before the first anniversary of the Ukraine war. Hello again and welcome to the program. First off in our news, the Secretary General of the Algerian Foreign Ministry, Mr. Ammar Beleni, received on Wednesday in Algiers the Russian ambassador to Algeria, Valerian Shwarev, with whom he stressed the need to prepare for the upcoming important bilateral events, foremost of which is the state visit that Algerian President Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune intends to pay to Russia next May.
Two sides emphasized the need to redouble efforts to increase the volume of trade exchanges between Algeria and Russia, with the urgent need to strengthen the multilateral action mechanisms and encourage a culture of dialogue, negotiation, and peaceful settlement of disputes. The meeting was an opportunity to discuss several issues of common interest, especially the fruitful cooperation between the two parties in energy issues, the process of Algeria's accession to the BRICS group, and the latest developments in the Western Sahara issue in light of the challenges posed by the intransigent and irresponsible position of the Kingdom of Morocco, which refuses to comply with the international legitimacy and its blatant maneuvers aimed at hampering the decolonization process in occupied Western Sahara.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Mtala Mamra, received on Wednesday in Algiers the Speaker of Parliament of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Moses Wetangula, accompanied by a high-level delegation as part of an official working visit to Algeria. The meeting was an opportunity to discuss the level of bilateral relations between the two countries, joint cooperation and ways to enable the African Parliament to perform its tasks, contribute to joint African action, and play its role in serving the interests of the continent.
We have underscored and emphasized the need for Africa to take control of its natural resources, claim a bigger share in international trade, and that's why we have created the African Free Trade Area. And Algeria and Kenya are champions of free trade, free movement of people, goods and services across our borders on the continent. Equally important, we have underscored the need for the people of Sahrawi to be accorded their inalienable birthright to self-determination, and any forces of occupation or retrogress in their quest for freedom are forces that are against the will of the African people.
To a different topic now, the Dean of the Algiers Grand Mosque, Sheikh Mohammed Al-Mamoum Al-Qasimi Al-Hassani, participates in the session, or the 25th session of the International Islamic Fiqh Academy Conference in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia. The symposium will discuss 160 scientific papers with the participation of 200 scientists and experts from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation countries, with the aim of studying contemporary developments. Turkish ambassador to Algeria, Mahinur Özdemir Göktaş, thanked Algeria for helping the victims of the two deadly earthquakes in Turkey, saying Algeria was at the forefront of countries providing aid to Turkey. This came during a meeting between Göktaş and Algerian Interior Minister Mr. Ibrahim Murad. For his part, the Algerian minister said his country's efforts on behalf of the earthquake victims in Turkey were a duty of brotherhood and expressed his deep condolences to Turkey for the victims.
We thank Algeria for the aid delivered to earthquake victims. Algeria was among the first to send relief to Turkey directly after the earthquake. The Algerian Civil Protection was present during the first hours of the catastrophe and was made up of 89 agents and rescued many victims from under the rubble in Adiyaman province. In my name and the name of the Turkish people and Turkey, I thank Algeria and Algerians for all the assistance in these difficult times.
Algeria is considering exporting oil and gas to Jordan to secure part of its needs with the growing demand for fuel locally. Algerian Minister of Energy and Mines, Mr. Mohamed Arqab, said during his meeting with a Jordanian parliamentary delegation that his country is serious about studying the possibility of supplying Jordan with crude oil, liquefied gas, and liquefied petroleum gas, stressing that aspects of cooperation with Jordan may extend to the distribution and storage of petroleum products. President of the African Union Commission, Mr. Moussa Faki, received Sahrawi Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Mohamed Sadati, at the EU headquarters in Addis Ababa, in which the two parties had talks that mainly focused on the AU's role in implementing the various decisions of the policy-making bodies related to Western Sahara cause. During his visit, Sadati briefed Mr. Moussa Faki on the current situation in Western Sahara. The Sahrawi foreign minister also repeated the Continental Organization role to push forward the decolonization path of his country and to enable the Sahrawi people to exercise their right in self-determination at the end of the 36th African Union Summit.
The Sahrawi Republic will remain faithful to its obligations towards the Continental Organization, out of its belief in the role of the African Union and its contribution to the establishment of peace, security and stability in Africa, as well as the lasting and just peace based on the Sahrawi people exercise of their inalienable right to self-determination and independence.
Inflation in Morocco jumped during the month of January to its highest level in more than 3 decades, driven by a significant surge in food prices. Data issued by the High Commission for Planning on Wednesday showed a rise of 16.8% in consumer prices during the past month to 8.9% on an annual basis, marking its highest level since 1991. To a different development now, 10 Palestinians were killed on Wednesday by the bullets of Zionist occupation, while more than 100 were injured in an aggression perpetrated on the city of Nablus in the northern occupied West Bank, an operation condemned by the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, as a massacre. Mohammed Khatir.
10 Palestinians were killed and more than 100 others were injured, including 7 seriously, as they were the target of the forces of the Zionist entity following an aggression carried out on the city of Nablus on Wednesday. In a reaction, presidential spokesman Nabil Abu Rudaina condemned the continuous Israeli aggression on the northern West Bank city of Nablus and held the Zionist government responsible for this dangerous escalation, which is pushing the region toward tension and explosion.
The crime committed by the occupation forces in the city of Nablus today reaffirms the importance of our demand that the international community must act immediately to stop the Zionist crimes against our people, their land, and their sanctities, and stop their unilateral measures.
For his part, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh commended the people of Nablus who never stopped making sacrifices throughout the long-standing struggle, stressing that they will never relinquish their rights to snatch freedom and establish their independent state.
The Palestinian cause and the right of the Palestinian people to end the occupation and establish the independent Palestinian state with Al-Qudus as its capital and the right of return for the refugees.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian leadership requested on Wednesday the United Nations Security Council to hold an emergency session on the massacre committed by the Zionist occupation forces in Nablus. It also requested the Council of the Arab League to convene at the level of permanent representatives, as well as the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, to convene a meeting to condemn the occupation's massacre and ensure international protection for the Palestinian people.
In a statement, the League of Arab States strongly condemned the new massacre committed by the Zionist forces in the city of Nablus. The League's General Secretariat held the occupation authorities and the extremist Zionist government responsible for the terrible massacre. It also held responsibility for the UN Security Council for the crimes and aggression consequences as well as their repercussions on security and stability in the region, asking the UN to enforce its decisions for an immediate end to the Zionist aggression and to provide protection for the Palestinian people. United Nations Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres said on Wednesday, or called on Wednesday, for an end to the Zionist settlement in occupied Palestinian lands. The new Zionist government has in recent weeks faced criticism, including from the United States, over a decision to give a retroactive permission to multiple settlement outposts in the occupied West Bank and to build new homes.
In this context, let me also note the importance of easing the movement of goods and people in and out the Gaza Strip. I reiterate my call to work towards a full lifting of the debilitating closures in line with UN Security Council Resolution 1860.
To a different world development now, the Russian parliament approved the suspension of Moscow's participation in the New START treaty. In a vote during Wednesday's session, the Duma approved the decision to suspend participation in the treaty. The Federation Council, which is the upper house, is scheduled to vote on the same proposal. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who is currently deputy head of the Russian Security Council, said the move was a long overdue response to what he described as a political declaration of war on Russia from the United States and NATO.
Конкретных вопросов.
We've seen, as have you, the first reaction to news that Russia has decided to suspend the New START nuclear arms control treaty. This reaction, of course, doesn't give us reason to hope for any willingness for dialogue or negotiations. But on the other hand, time passes, circumstances change, and here it is very important for Russia to do everything to ensure its own security, including issues around matters of stability and arms control, and to keep a patient approach while waiting for the time when our opponents are ready for normal dialogue.
And in the same context, US President Joe Biden said on Wednesday that Russian President Vladimir Putin made a big mistake by suspending his country's participation in the last remaining US-Russia nuclear arms control treaty. In his first comments since Putin's announcement Tuesday, Biden condemned the Russian decision to pull back from the treaty known as New START. The United Nations General Assembly began a meeting to a vote on draft resolution stressing the need to reach peace in Ukraine. About 60 countries submitted the draft resolution, which stresses the need to reach a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine as soon as possible, in accordance with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. The text reaffirms adherence to Ukraine's unity and territorial integrity, demands the immediate withdrawal of Russian forces, and calls for a cessation of hostilities. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has received China's top diplomat Wang Yi in Moscow, as China and Russia reaffirmed their close bilateral relations just days before the first anniversary of the start of the Ukraine war, that Beijing says will propose a plan to end the conflict. Nabil Khazini.
At a time when the war is reaching a level of no return, a glimmer of hope seems to appear on the horizon. Everyone in the conflict wants peace but doesn't know how, and China says there is a way to bring the war to an end. And it was here in Moscow where the Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in a show of solidarity. Beijing has been positioning itself as a broker for the end of the Ukraine conflict and has said its President Xi Jinping will deliver a peace speech on the exact day of the one-year anniversary of the war.
The current international situation is indeed grim and complex, but China-Russia relations have withstood the test of the international situation and remained mature, tenacious, and stable. Although crises and chaos often appear in front of us, there are opportunities in crises, and crises can be turned into opportunities.
The Russian president told the Chinese top diplomat that cooperation between Russia and China is very important for stabilizing the international situation. China has said it will soon release details of a plan to bring peace in Ukraine, a proposal met with skepticism in the US and Europe.
China is one of the few countries that have not been able to condemn Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. And we also are concerned about that China may be planning for also providing military support to Russia.
President Volodymyr Zelensky said he was not aware of the specifics of China's peace plan it wants to present, adding that he is counting on the support of the Ukrainian peace formula. What is certain is that the plan proposed by the Western countries and the efforts put in by the Western leaders to mediate the ongoing conflict have failed, and the world at the moment really needs a new plan that is able to break the deadlock.
Russian President Vladimir Putin described international relations as difficult and said Moscow was waiting for Xi Jinping to visit Russia as the two parties showcased their deepening ties on Wednesday. In a series of meetings in Moscow closely watched for signs that Beijing might offer stronger support to the Kremlin. The visit by Wang Yi, the Chinese Communist Party's most senior foreign policy official, comes as the conflict in Ukraine continues to upend the global diplomatic order.
International relations are difficult today. They didn't become better after the collapse of the bipolar system. On the contrary, they become more acute. In this regard, the cooperation on the international arena between the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, as we stressed not once, has a very big significance for the stabilization of the international situation. Of course, we are waiting for the head of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, to visit Russia.
During his visit to Moscow, China's top diplomat Wang Yi said that relations between their nations are mature, resilient, and stable, and emphasized that their comprehensive strategic partnership is not subjected to interference and provocation by any third party.
The China-Russia comprehensive strategic partnership is never targeted by any third party. And of course, it will not be impacted by interference and provocation from any third party. We will not yield to any coercion and pressure of any third party.
Meanwhile, the West is preparing more sanctions against Russia before the first anniversary of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, while Moscow is facing them with steadfastness. Here is Miriam Zian.
Just days before the first anniversary of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, sanctions and counter-sanctions between the West and Moscow are expanding. The Group of Seven are set to create a new tool to coordinate their enforcement of existing sanctions on Russia and to offer additional support for Ukraine. However, as the EU discussed the 10th package of sanctions today, it failed to reach an agreement and planned further discussion. The proposed package includes trade curbs worth more than 10 billion euros, including a ban on EU imports of Russian rubber, EU exports to Russia of technology equipment, and an embargo on imports of Russian diamonds, among others.
So that's why we hope that we will see this sanction in 10th package. Otherwise, maybe in the next packages, but we will we're going to have a very practical discussion here during these 2 days, and we'll see what is going to be at the final version of the sanction package.
Joe Biden, for his part, said the US and its allies will announce more sanctions against individuals and entities that support Moscow.
We continue to maintain the largest sanction regime ever imposed in any country in history. And we're going to announce more sanctions this week together with our partners. We'll hold accountable those who are responsible for this war, and we'll seek justice for the war crimes and crimes against humanity continuing to be committed by the Russians.
And as a response to these measures, Putin said the West hasn't succeeded in defeating Russia's economy.
As I said, the West has turned against Russia not only a military and information force, but also an economic one. But it has not achieved its goals anywhere, and it will not. Moreover, those who initiated the sanctions against Russia have punished themselves, caused price increases, job losses, business closures, and an energy crisis in their countries.
Washington and Brussels are exacerbating their pressure, while Russia is showing resilience and defiance and is strengthening cooperation with its allies such as China, India, and African countries.
U.S. President Joe Biden met with NATO leaders on the eastern wing of the alliance in Warsaw, Poland, on Friday, amidst rising tensions with Russia. Biden reaffirmed the United States' commitment to NATO and its willingness to defend every inch of the alliance. Here's Hassan Burkan.
Fresh from his visit to Ukraine, President Biden arrived in Warsaw with NATO allies. The meeting was held in the backdrop of increasing tensions between Moscow and Kiev and a significant reduction in gas sales from Russia to Europe. During the summit, President Biden emphasized the importance of the alliance's eastern flank, which includes Poland as the front line of NATO's collective defense. Biden expressed his confidence in the knowledge and expertise of the eastern wing in dealing with the ongoing conflict.
As NATO's eastern flank, you're in the front lines of our collective defense, and you know better than anyone what's at stake in this conflict, not just for Ukraine, but for the freedom of democracies throughout Europe and around the world. What we wish to do.
Polish President Andrzej Duda responded positively to Biden's statement and called for continued support for Ukraine ahead of upcoming summits.
What we wish to do today is to think together among closest allies about our next steps in the run-up to the B9 summit in Bratislava and the NATO summit in Vilnius, and about the possibilities to provide further support to Ukraine.
The leaders present at the summit reinforced their commitment to NATO's Article 5, which states that an attack on one member is considered as an attack on all. They also discussed strategies to counter Russia's aggression and prevent further escalation of the conflict. This meeting of NATO leaders comes at a time when tensions between Russia and the West are at an all-time high, with the threats of a wider conflict looming in the horizon.
To a different story now. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman said on Monday that Iran highly values its cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency and is committed to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the IAEA's safeguards and agreements. The spokesman added that Iran hopes that the IAEA will act professionally toward its peaceful nuclear activities and remain committed to the principles and frameworks of carrying out professional and expert cooperation.
Iran has been committed to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and Safeguards Agreements. Conducting professional cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency remains an important principle for Iran to maintain contact and deepen cooperation with the agency.
Inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency are in Tehran for negotiations and verification, according to the head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, Mohammad Eslami. Eslami said the IAEA inspectors have been in Iran since Tuesday and stated that Iran will not tolerate political pressures.
We maintain our relationship with the IAEA within the bounds of the safeguards. Regarding the matters that the agency inspector had mentioned, agency officials have been in Tehran since yesterday. They are negotiating, visiting and inspecting, and the ambiguities caused by an incorrect takeaway by one inspector have been resolved or are being resolved. The main parties of this agreement have not fulfilled their commitments, and the Americans both did not cooperate themselves and did not allow others to cooperate.
The United Nations highest court ordered Azerbaijan on Wednesday to remove a roadblock from the only road between Armenia and the ethnic Armenian Nagorno-Karabakh region in Azerbaijan that has further fueled tensions between the two countries. The legally binding 13-2 ruling by the International Court of Justice results from the latest legal skirmishes in a long-running feud between Armenia and Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh. Each country filed a case with the court accusing the other of breaching a convention aimed at stamping out racial discrimination. Wednesday's ruling on the blocked road known as the Lachin Corridor came just over 2 years after the neighboring nations ended a war in Nagorno-Karabakh that killed about 6,800 soldiers and displaced around 90,000 civilians. And finally, in our news, Algeria finished the African Fencing Championship for the immediate or intermediate category, which concluded Tuesday in Accra, Ghana. Well, that's the end. Take care.